step into the shadows of history, where whispers of witchcraft echo through centuries. Beyond the myths and fairy tales lie real women, accused, feared, and remembered as witches. Their stories are not of broomsticks and spells, but of terror, persecution, and dark legends that shook entire kingdoms. From secret rituals to chilling accusations, these witches carried reputations that inspired both dread and fascination. Today, we uncover their haunting backstories, tales of power, fear, and mystery that still linger in the world's imagination. Prepare yourself for the chilling truth of real witches from history with terrifying backstories. The figure of the witch has haunted human imagination for centuries. From crackling bonfires in Europe to whispered legends in villages across the world, witches were seen as figures of fear, women, and sometimes men, who dealt in forbidden knowledge, consorted with demons, or wielded powers beyond human understanding. Yet behind the myths and terrors were real people whose lives became entangled in accusation, superstition, and power struggles. The stories of so-called witches are not just tales of sorcery, but windows into humanity's darkest fears. Fear of the unknown, fear of women's independence, fear of disease, misfortune, and social upheaval. What makes these accounts terrifying is not only the claims of magic and curses, but also the brutal punishments, betrayals, and tragedies that followed. Let us walk through history's haunted corridors and meet some of the most infamous witches whose terrifying backstories still linger in memory. 1. Alice Kyteler, Ireland's first condemned witch. In 1324, Alice Kyteler became the first recorded woman accused of witchcraft in Ireland. A wealthy innkeeper, she married 4 times, and all her husbands died mysteriously, leaving her richer each time. Whispers spread that she had poisoned them with her potions and enchanted charms. The Bishop of Ossory, Richard de Ladrede, accused her of heresy, demon worship, and sorcery. She was said to have sacrificed animals to the devil, held secret midnight rituals, and bewitched her husbands into transferring wealth to her. Her terrifying reputation grew as stories spread of her using spells written in blood and keeping a demon familiar in the form of a black cat. But perhaps what frightened people most was her independence and success as a woman in a society that feared female power. Though Alice fled and escaped execution, her maid Petronilla of Meath was tortured and burned at the stake, the first woman in Ireland to die for witchcraft. Alice's story reveals how wealth, jealousy, and gender could combine into a deadly accusation. 2. Agnes Sampson, the Witch of Scotland. In 1590, Scotland was gripped by witchcraft hysteria. King James VI, paranoid about witches conspiring against his rule, launched trials across the land. One of the most infamous victims was Agnes Sampson, a respected midwife and healer from East Lothian. Agnes was accused of raising storms through black magic to endanger the king's ship on his return from Denmark. Witnesses claimed she led gatherings of witches at North Berwick, performing dark rituals, kissing the devil's hand, and conjuring tempests. Dragged before the king, Agnes endured horrific torture. She was shaved, pricked with needles to find the devil's mark, and tied with ropes that crushed her body. Broken by pain, she confessed to meeting with Satan and plotting against the monarch. Her backstory is terrifying not just because of the supernatural charges, but because of the cruelty she endured. Agnes was executed by strangulation and burning, her name etched forever into Scotland's bloody witch hunt history. Her death also fueled James's obsession with demonology, inspiring his infamous book Demonology. 3. La Voisin, the Poison Witch of France. In 17th century Paris, Catherine Monvoisin, better known as La Voisin, became the central figure in one of France's darkest scandals, the Affair of the Poisons. La Voisin was a fortune teller and alleged sorceress who catered to the nobility, offering potions, poisons, and black masses. Clients came to her seeking love spells, inheritance charms, and sometimes more sinister requests, such as poison to rid themselves of rivals or unwanted husbands. Rumors claimed she performed rituals with consecrated hosts stolen from churches, invoked demons, and even conducted child sacrifices as part of her occult practices. Her house became infamous for its secret chambers where forbidden rites took place. When the scandal broke, Lavoisier was arrested and subjected to interrogation. She confessed to supplying poisons and arranging black masses, but denied the most horrific accusations. Still, the terrifying image of her as a witch who dealt death and darkness sealed her fate. In 1680, she was burned alive, silenced but never forgotten. Her backstory reveals the intersection of witchcraft, politics, and corruption at the heart of Louis Xivy's glittering but shadowy court. 4. Tituba, the enslaved witch of Salem. The Salem witch trials of 1692 remain one of the most infamous episodes of mass hysteria in history, and at their center was Tituba, an enslaved woman from Barbados. Tituba belonged to Reverend Samuel Parris, whose daughter and niece were among the first to exhibit strange fits and convulsions, symptoms later blamed on witchcraft. Pressured under interrogation, Tituba confessed to practicing magic, telling chilling tales of pacts with the devil, visions of black dogs, red cats, and spectral figures. What made her confession terrifying was its vividness. She spoke of witches flying through the night and signing the devil's book, which seemed to confirm the community's fears. Her testimony ignited a wave of accusations that led to over 200 people charged and 20 executed. Yet historians suggest her confession may have been coerced, her stories shaped by the pressures of torture and the cultural clash between her Caribbean heritage and Puritan fears. Tituba survived the trials but disappeared from records, her haunting role forever tied to America's most chilling witch hunt. 5. Mother Shipton, the prophetess of doom. Not all witches were accused of poisons and pacts with demons. Some terrified people through prophecy. In 16th century England, Ursula Southill, better known as Mother Shipton, was said to have been born in a cave during a thunderstorm, her mother accused of consorting with the devil. As she grew, Ursula became famous for her crooked appearance, hooked nose, and strange abilities. She told fortunes, crafted herbal remedies, and most terrifyingly, predicted disasters. Legends claim she foretold the Great Fire of London, the defeat of the Spanish Armada, and even technological wonders like iron ships and flying machines. Though many of her prophecies were recorded after her death, her reputation as a witch and seer struck fear into people's hearts. To some she was a wise woman, to others an omen of doom. Her cave became a site of superstition, where a petrifying well still turns objects to stone, a fitting legacy for England's most haunting witch. 6. Baba Yaga, the Witch of the Forest. While Baba Yaga exists more in folklore than direct history, she represents a terrifying archetype drawn from centuries of cultural memory in Slavic lands. Depicted as a wild, bone-legged witch who lives in a hut standing on chicken legs, she flies through the sky in a mortar, wielding a pestle. But behind the myth, scholars suggest Baba Yaga may have been inspired by real women, wise healers, midwives, or outsiders feared for their knowledge of herbs and rituals. In stories, she kidnaps children, devours travelers, and tests heroes with impossible tasks. Yet she also sometimes aids those who show courage or respect. The terrifying backstory of Baba Yaga lies not in one life, but in the enduring image of the witch as both feared and revered, a reminder of how folklore can blur with lived history. For peasants in dark forests, Baba Yaga was no fairy tale. She was the embodiment of danger lurking just beyond the firelight. 7. The Pendle Witches, England's darkest trial. In 1612, 12 people from the Pendle region of Lancashire, England, were accused of witchcraft in one of the most notorious trials in English history. The families of Demdike and Chaddocks were poor, marginalized, and long suspected of witchcraft. They were accused of causing deaths, blighting crops, and using clay images to curse their neighbors. The testimony of a 9-year-old girl, Janet Device, sealed their fate, as she claimed her own relatives held witch gatherings and consorted with familiar spirits. 10 of the accused were hanged. The terrifying backstory here lies not only in the accusations, but in the betrayal within families and communities. Poverty, fear, and suspicion turned neighbor against neighbor, creating legends of dark magic that still echo in Pendle's Hills today. Why these witches terrified the world. Each of these women, and the legends around them, terrified societies not only because of alleged supernatural powers, but because they embodied deeper fears. Fear of women's power. Independent, wealthy, or outspoken women often drew suspicion. Fear of the unknown. Healers, midwives, and seers wielded knowledge others did not understand. Fear of social chaos. In times of plague, famine, or war, witches became scapegoats. Fear of the devil. Religious authorities used witchcraft accusations to reinforce spiritual and political control. The terrifying truth is that many so-called witches were not wielders of black magic, but victims of prejudice, hysteria, and power struggles. Their backstories reveal as much about human cruelty as they do about human imagination. The spell of fear. Witches have always stood at the crossroads of history, myth, and terror. For centuries, societies have wrestled with the idea of hidden figures wielding powers beyond ordinary comprehension. The word, which conjures images of spells, dark rituals, and pacts with sinister forces, but the reality of history is far more complex. From Alice Keitler in medieval Ireland to the Salem witch trials in colonial America, the legacy of witchcraft accusations reflects not only supernatural fears, but also deeper struggles: gender, class, politics, and religion. Some accused witches, like La Voisin of France, may have indeed trafficked in poisons and forbidden rituals. Others, like Agnes Sampson of Scotland or the Pendle women of England, became victims of hysteria, tortured confessions, and power-driven scapegoating. The enduring fascination with witches lies in the blend of tragedy and legend, in how their stories continue to haunt cultural memory. Their lives and deaths illuminate a history where truth and fear are inseparable, and where myths often outlived reality. Alice Keitler, Ireland's infamous witch. The tale of Alice Keitler, accused in 1324, reveals how wealth and independence could be weaponized as evidence of witchcraft. Born into privilege in Kilkenny, Alice married 4 times. Each husband left her wealthier, but also increasingly unpopular. When her 4th husband fell ill, his children accused her of poisoning him with sorcery. Rumors swirled of her secret rituals, sacrifices to demons, and a demon familiar in the form of a black cat. Richard de Ladrede, the Bishop of Ossory, saw in Alice an opportunity to assert his authority by prosecuting her for heresy. She was charged with denying Christ, sacrificing animals, and using spells written in blood. Alice's terrifying legacy lay not only in the accusations, but in the trial's brutality. Though she escaped into exile, her maid Petronilla of Meath was tortured until she confessed to aiding her mistress in black rites. Petronilla was burned alive, the first Irish woman executed for witchcraft. This case shows how gender, wealth, and power created an atmosphere ripe for witchcraft hysteria. Alice herself vanished into history, but her legend lingered as Ireland's first real witch. Agnes Sampson, Scotland's wise woman turned witch. Agnes Sampson was a respected healer and midwife, But during the North Barrack witch trials of 1590, her reputation turned against her. King James VI, soon to become James I of England, was obsessed with the threat of witches after storms nearly sank his ship, returning from Denmark. Desperate to prove witches were real, James ordered the arrest of dozens of suspects. Agnes was accused of leading gatherings where witches kissed the devil, raised storms, and plotted the king's death. Dragged before James, she endured horrific torture, shaved bald, pricked for the devil's mark, and bound until her body broke. Eventually, she confessed to everything, though her words reflected her torment more than truth. She was strangled and burned in 1591, her body destroyed to erase her memory. Agnes's terrifying legacy illustrates how women with healing knowledge became targets, their wisdom reframed as dangerous sorcery. Her story also helped fuel James's infamous book Demonology, which justified witch hunts across Britain. La Voisin, the poisoner of Paris. In the glittering court of Louis XIV, sorcery and scandal entwined in the affair of the poisons. At its heart was Catherine Monvoisin, better known as La Voisin, a fortune-teller and alleged witch. La Voisin provided love charms, poisons, and fortune readings to Parisian elites. But darker rumors accused her of performing black masses, sacrificing infants, and invoking demons for noble clients desperate for power or love. Her terrifying reputation spread as investigators uncovered a network of poisoners and occultists. Nobles implicated in the scandal included Louis XIV's own mistress, Madame de Montespan, accused of seeking La Voisin's help to maintain the king's affection. La Voisin's trial painted her as a high priestess of darkness. Though she denied the worst claims, she was burned alive in 1680. The terror of her story lies in its blend of truth and legend. Poison was real, corruption was real, but her demonic reputation amplified her into a figure of nightmare. Her legacy reminds us that accusations of witchcraft often flourished where politics, desire, and ambition collided. The Pendle Witches, England's darkest trial. In 1612, 12 people from Lancashire were accused of witchcraft in what became England's most notorious witch trial. The Pendle region was poor, isolated, and rife with superstition. Two families, the Demdikes and the Chattoxes, lived on the margins, long suspected of sorcery. When a traveling peddler fell ill after an argument with young Alison Device, suspicion erupted into hysteria. Accusations flew of curses, clay images, and secret gatherings. The most chilling testimony came from a 9-year-old girl, Janet Device, who testified against her own family. Her words sealed their fate. 10 were hanged, their bodies swinging as warnings against witchcraft. The terrifying part of this story is not spells, but betrayal, children condemning parents, neighbors turning against one another. The Pendle Witches remain legends in Lancashire, their story retold in folklore, literature, and even tourism, as symbols of fear twisted into history. Salem, the American tragedy. Perhaps no witchcraft episode is as famous or as terrifying as the Salem witch trials of 1692. In Puritan, Massachusetts, a group of young girls began exhibiting strange fits, claiming to be tormented by unseen forces. Under pressure, they accused Tituba, an enslaved woman, along with Sarah Good and Sarah Osborne. Tituba's coerced confession painted vivid images of devils, black dogs, and witches' books. Soon the accusations multiplied. Neighbors, ministers, and even respected community members were charged. The trials descended into hysteria. Spectral evidence, visions and dreams, was accepted in court. Over 200 people were accused, 20 were executed by hanging, and one man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death under heavy stones. What makes Salem's legacy terrifying is not just the executions, but the mass paranoia that consumed an entire community. Salem remains a symbol of how fear and suspicion can destroy reason, justice, and lives. The themes behind the legends. Though separated by time and geography, these which most accused witches were women, often widows, healers, or outspoken individuals who challenged social norms. Their independence made them vulnerable. Wealthy women like Alice Keitler drew jealousy, while poor women like the Pendle witches carried suspicion as burdens of survival. 2. Religion and fear of the devil. In deeply religious societies, witchcraft symbolized rebellion against God. Charges often included pacts with the devil, inverted rituals, or blasphemy. For leaders like James VI, proving witches existed reinforced divine authority. 3. Scapegoats in times of crisis. Witch hunts flourished during famine, war, or plague. Misfortune demanded explanation, and witches provided a convenient scapegoat. Salem, Pendle, and North Berwick all reflect societies unraveling under stress. 4. Torture and confession. The terrifying confessions of witches often came from torture, needle pricks, crushing ropes, or sleep deprivation. These proofs of sorcery created myths that spread faster than truth. 5. Legends that outlived reality. Even when evidence was flimsy, the legends persisted. La Voisin became a figure of demonic excess, Mother Shipton a prophetess of doom, and Baba Yaga a folkloric terror. Reality blurred into story, leaving legacies far larger than life. The legacy of witches today. Centuries later, witches remain figures of fascination. Halloween costumes, fairy tales, and films often portray them as villains, or more recently, as misunderstood heroines. In modern times, witches are reinterpreted through the lens of feminism and spirituality. The witch has become a symbol of resistance, reclaiming the power once demonized. Practices like Wicca and neo-paganism embrace the witch as a healer and protector rather than a figure of fear. But the tragic legacy cannot be ignored. Tens of thousands of people, mostly women, were executed in Europe and America between the 15th and 18th centuries. Their deaths stand as a warning of the dangers of hysteria, prejudice, and unchecked authority. Witches, legends, and legacy remind us that behind every myth lies human suffering, but also enduring cultural power. Between fear and memory. From Alice Keitler in Ireland to the burning pyres of Salem, the witch has embodied humanity's deepest fears of women's power, of the unknown, of the devil himself. Some, like La Voisin, may indeed have trafficked in shadowy practices. Others, like Agnes Sampson and the Pendle women, were crushed by accusations beyond their control. Their stories blend tragedy and legend, terror and myth. What remains is a legacy that continues to shape literature, folklore, and cultural imagination. Witches stand as symbols of persecution and power, fear and fascination, a reminder that history is never only about what happened, but about what people believed, and how those beliefs could kill. The legacy of witches is not just a tale of darkness, it is also a warning. When fear overwhelms reason, when myth becomes law, innocent lives are destroyed. Yet from those ashes rise legends that continue to haunt us, centuries later. History remembers these women as witches, but behind the fear and superstition were human lives marked by tragedy, mystery, and power. Their stories remind us how easily truth can be twisted, and how fear can create legends that outlive centuries. Whether seen as villains, victims, or visionaries, their legacies still haunt our imagination today. If these tales of real witches and their terrifying backstories fascinated you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more journeys into the dark corners of history. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and remember, the past is never truly gone.